She told the world her name was Claire Donovan, 32 years old, born and raised under the blazing Arizona sun, a daughter of Phoenix who carried her city in every step. She had built herself from scratch, crafting a small marketing agency with nothing but grit, determination, and sleepless nights that blurred into one another. To many, her life looked polished, professional, enviable. But behind that calm surface lived a truth layered with sacrifices no one had thanked her for. Just last week, her father had called. His voice had held a warmth she hadn't heard in years, maybe not since childhood. He had said, "Come early, Claire, we'll celebrate you." The words made her heart leap, and against her better judgment she allowed herself to imagine a genuine celebration. For years she had fed her family with her labor, carrying their needs on her back. Maybe now, finally, they wanted to see her, to honor her, to give her something other than another request for money or another sigh that she hadn't done enough. That night, Claire slipped into her favorite black dress, the one that had accompanied her to client dinners and late-night pitches, the one that gave her both strength and armor. She whispered to herself, "Tonight is different. Tonight they see me." The resort shimmered as she pulled into the driveway, valet lights bouncing off glass and chrome. She walked in expecting smiles of pride, hugs that carried love rather than obligation. The ballroom was a swirl of crystal chandeliers, laughter, and polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. At the door, a waiter greeted her with a practiced smile and extended a tray of name tags. Claire plucked hers from the silver tray, her eyes dropping down to read the label. 2 words froze her breath: limited guest. Her stomach tightened. What did that even mean? She looked up, confused, but the waiter had already turned away. She pinned the tag to her dress with trembling fingers. Her sister drifted close, her whisper sharp as a blade. "That means no food, Claire, just drinks." Her laugh was low and cruel, as if the humiliation itself were an appetizer. Moments later, her mother threw her head back and laughed as though this were the cleverest joke in the world. Her brother leaned against the bar, smirking over the rim of his glass, satisfied in the role of spectator to his sister's humiliation. Claire's father shook hands across the room, deliberately avoiding her eyes, as though her presence were an inconvenience, a shadow at the edge of his social theater. The room spun around her. They had invited her under the pretense of celebration, only to mock her, to remind her she was welcome only as a wallet, never as a daughter. The laughter rang sharp, each chuckle slicing her open. Guests nearby glanced over, some smirking, some confused, all witnesses to her degradation. Claire's hands shook, but her face remained composed. She felt a silence rising inside her, heavy, but calm. Her phone was in her hand before she even realized it. With a steady thumb, she typed a single command to her bank's system: "Cancel everything." Within minutes, alerts began to pulse across the ballroom. Phones lit up like sudden sparks in the dark. Her mother's laugh snapped shut. Her brother's grin slid from his face, and her father's eyes narrowed as he pulled out his phone, reading with growing alarm. Claire remained seated at the edge of the table, sipping her water, a mask of serenity across her face. She did not shout. She did not explain. She simply ended their free ride with the same quiet efficiency she had used to build her business. In that instant, the balance shifted. No longer the family's financial anchor, she had cut the rope that bound her to their endless weight. She glanced at her reflection in the glass of her water. For the first time in years, the eyes staring back at her did not look like prey. They looked like resolve. She gathered her purse, stood gracefully, and with a calm voice that carried more power than a scream, she said, "Thank you for the drinks." Then she walked out, the chandeliers glinting behind her like fading stars. The night air outside the resort wrapped around Claire like a warning and a promise. The desert heat clung to her skin, but inside she felt strangely cool, composed. For years, she had told herself that sacrifice was love, that pouring her earnings into her family's endless needs was proof of devotion. She had believed that if she gave enough, they would see her worth, that her success would somehow bloom into their respect. Tonight had torn that illusion apart. Claire slid into her car, her fingers steady on the wheel. Behind her, in the glowing ballroom, the phones of her family and their guests continued to buzz with messages they could not ignore. Her brother would see his debts come crashing down. Her mother's indulgences, the spa trips and shopping sprees she disguised as self-care, would halt. Her father's business fantasies and golf weekends would dissolve into silence. The account they had treated as an open wallet had closed with one firm touch of Claire's hand. On the drive home, she replayed years of memories she had buried under obligation. Derek's panicked voice begging for help with rent, a request that later revealed itself to be a lie when she saw the brand-new gaming console on his living room floor. Her mother's soft cooing about medical bills that somehow transformed into luxury getaways. Her father's smooth explanations for new ventures, which never produced anything but receipts for indulgence. Each memory was a stone she had carried in her chest, and now, mile by mile, she felt herself setting them down. Her phone buzzed against the passenger seat, but she did not answer. The names lighting up the screen. Mom, Dad. Derek would wait forever. Tonight, she was done listening. By the time she pulled into her modest Phoenix apartment complex, the weight of years had lifted enough for her to breathe deeply, fully. She climbed the stairs to her door, her heels clicking softly against the concrete, each step a declaration that she was no longer their pawn. 3 days later, they arrived uninvited. The knock on her door was heavy, impatient, and she knew before opening it who stood on the other side. When she pulled it open, her father strode in first, his presence filling the small living room as though he owned the space. Her mother followed, face tight, lips already forming excuses. Derek trailed behind, hands shoved into his pockets, eyes darting with restless guilt. Claire crossed her arms, standing her ground in the center of the room. "You've gone too far," her father began, pacing near her couch like a judge pronouncing sentence. "Cutting us off like that. At your own celebration, no less." Claire met his gaze, unflinching. "You invited me to humiliate me," she said evenly. "I only returned the favor." Her mother bristled, throwing her hands up in exaggerated exasperation. "It was a joke, Claire. That tag everyone laughed. You're blowing this out of proportion." Claire shook her head slowly. "A joke does not feel like a knife. That night, it was meant to cut. And it did." Derek leaned against the wall, shoulders slouched, his confidence crumbling. His voice was low, almost shaking. "You screwed me over. I needed that account." She tilted her head, her patience thinning. "Needed it for what, Derek? The rent I paid? Or the money you took without asking?" His jaw shifted, eyes sliding away, and silence answered louder than words. Her father jumped in quickly, his tone sharp, commanding. "Stop interrogating him, we're family." Claire laughed, bitter and short. "Family doesn't treat me like an ATM." Her mother's voice rose, sharper now. "You owe us, we raised you, gave you everything." Claire's voice cut through the room like glass breaking. "Everything? I gave you $50,000. I kept Derek's apartment. I paid your surgery bills, Dad's cars, vacations, dreams, and what did I get? A name tag that told the world I wasn't welcome at my own celebration. Derek's head snapped up, panic written across his face. His words stumbled out, desperate. It wasn't just rent, I used some of the money for investments. Stocks, crypto. I thought I could make it back, pay you back. Claire's fists clenched at her sides, her heart pounding with betrayal she had always suspected but never confirmed. You gambled my company's money. You lied. All of you lied. Her father's tone hardened, his words cold. You'll regret this. We're your family. Claire walked to the door, her voice firm and final. Family respects each other. You never did. She held the door open, waiting. One by one they stepped out, their faces shifting from anger to unease. Her father left last, his silence heavier than any curse. She closed the door behind them, the click of the lock sealing more than just wood and metal. It sealed a new boundary. Weeks passed, yet silence from her family did not feel like peace. It carried the tension of a storm waiting to break. Claire buried herself in her agency, the one space they could not corrupt. Her office smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink, her desk stacked with sketches, client contracts, and the bright hum of new campaigns in motion. It was here that she found her rhythm again, pouring herself into work that was hers alone. One morning, as the Phoenix sun stretched across her blinds, her phone buzzed. A notification from a social platform flashed across her screen. Derek had posted. She opened it hesitantly, already bracing herself. His words were sharp, cruelly crafted. Some people taste a little success and suddenly turn selfish, ungrateful. He tagged her name so everyone could see. Claire's stomach tightened, but she forced herself to read on. The comments rolled in fast. Old neighbors, distant cousins, even people she barely remembered from school added their voices. Some mocked her, others threw pity toward her family. Her mother had shared Derek's post with a crying face emoji, typing only 3 vague words. So disappointed. Her father had joined in with a single comment. Never thought my own daughter would betray us. The betrayal struck harder than their words at her apartment. This was public now, their lies growing roots in front of an audience that believed them. Claire scrolled until the screen blurred, her hands shaking with a mixture of fury and shame. She opened another app, the one people now called X, and found Derek there too. He had posted again, labeling her a greedy sellout who abandoned her blood. Her mother had reposted it proudly, her profile still adorned with the line, "Proud Mom." The irony was bitter on Claire's tongue. Her father had not posted, but his string of likes beneath Derek's attacks was enough. Her chest tightened. They were rewriting the story, turning her from the one who had given them years of support into the villain who had walked away. They wanted her broken, cornered, small. She dropped her phone onto her desk, pressing her palms against the wood as her breath came ragged. Then it rang. Monica's voice burst through the speaker, sharp but steady. "Claire, check your email right now. A client tipped me off. Derek's been talking to your competitor." Claire's pulse spiked. She opened her inbox with trembling fingers. The subject lines glared back at her. Rumors about leaks. A colleague's message confirmed what she feared. Derek had tried to contact a rival agency, offering details of her upcoming campaign, her strategies, even client lists. He had not just stolen her money, he had tried to dismantle her future. For a moment she felt sick. But beneath the nausea came a cold wave of clarity. She logged into her agency's servers. Her fingers flying across the keyboard. She changed passwords, revoked access, sealed every digital door that Derek might have peeked through. Every keystroke felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Monica's voice steadied her through the phone. "You need to protect yourself." "Legally," Claire nodded even though her friend could not see her. "I know." That evening, she called a lawyer she had worked with on contracts. She explained everything. The online posts, the lies, the sabotage attempt. The lawyer listened quietly before speaking bluntly. "This is defamation and a potential breach of confidentiality. Start documenting everything." And so she did. Screenshots filled her desktop, posts archived, comments saved, emails secured. She built a wall of proof, piece by piece. Not because she wanted a war, but because her family had declared one. By nightfall, her inbox filled with messages from clients and colleagues who had seen Derek's posts. Some reached out with sympathy, others with suspicion. The gossip spread faster than the truth. She crafted a short, neutral statement for her agency's social page. "My focus remains on delivering strong work for my clients. Thank you for your support." It was calm, professional, measured, but beneath it burned a storm. She sat at her desk staring at Derek's latest words. "She thinks she's too good for us." She wanted to answer with every receipt, every dollar, every lie, but she didn't. Instead, she closed the app and leaned back in her chair, her resolve hardening. They had taken her money, her trust, and now they were clawing at her reputation. But she would not let them take her future. The message came one afternoon when the Arizona sky was painted in streaks of orange and gold. Claire had agreed to meet her family one last time, though every instinct told her not to. The location was her choice, a small diner on the edge of Phoenix, far from chandeliers and polished ballrooms. The tables were chipped, the booths worn, the smell of fried onions and burnt coffee filling the air. She wanted no glamour here, only honesty. She arrived early, slipping into a corner booth with her back against the wall, a lukewarm cup of coffee in front of her. She had rehearsed her resolve, whispering to herself that this was not a reconciliation but a conclusion. When the bell above the door jingled, she looked up to see them arrive together, her father, tall and stiff, her mother, her expression strained with forced softness, Derek, his eyes already narrowed, and surprisingly, her grandmother Helen trailing behind them. Her father sat down first, posture rigid, voice low as if offering a truce. "We need to talk, Claire." She leaned back, her face neutral. "I'm here. Say what you need to say." Her mother clasped her hands together tightly on the table. "We can move past this, you're our family, we don't want to lose you." The words sounded like lines from a script rehearsed in the car, a performance designed to tug at Claire's heart. Claire set her cup down, her eyes steady. "You didn't care about family when you laughed at that tag, when you shared Derek's posts, when you let strangers call me ungrateful. You only care now because I stopped paying." Her mother's face flushed, her lips tightening, but she didn't answer. Derek leaned forward, his tone sharp, his jaw tight. "You're making us look bad. You cut us off, and now everyone thinks we're the problem." Claire tilted her head, a small, bitter laugh escaping. "Everyone thinks? Or is it the truth showing through? You called me selfish on the internet. You tried to sabotage my business. Who's making who look bad?" He didn't deny it. His silence was more telling than words. Helen, who had been quiet until now, reached across the table. Her hand, warm and trembling, landed gently on Claire's. Family is about forgiveness, she whispered. We've made mistakes, but we can fix this. Don't throw us away. Her eyes, lined with age, carried a plea Claire had never seen before. For a moment, Claire felt herself waver, but then memory rose like a tide. The name tag that had mocked her. The $50,000 drained from her company. Derek's smug confession about gambling away her trust. The online posts that had painted her as a villain. And the betrayal that had cut her business to the bone. She pulled her hand back slowly, her voice steady. Family doesn't use each other like a bank. You treated me as a resource, not a daughter, not a sister. Her father's face hardened, his tone sharp and unyielding. You're being stubborn. We raised you, gave you everything. Claire laughed, short and cold. You raised me to believe love meant sacrifice. But all you gave me were debts. I'm done being your safety net. Her mother's eyes widened, her voice rising with desperation. You can't just walk away from us. We're your blood. Claire slid a $20 bill onto the table, enough to cover her coffee and a tip. This is the last thing I'm paying for. Her voice was calm, final. Derek started to speak, but she silenced him with a glance. Her grandmother's eyes filled with tears, but Claire could not stay. She rose, her footsteps firm, the bell above the door ringing as she left. Outside, the evening air carried the hum of the city. The skyline glowed faintly, the desert stars beginning to pierce the twilight. They had tried one last time to pull her back into the trap of obligation, but she had walked away. For the first time, she felt the weight lifting completely. She was free. Months passed, and Claire discovered a rhythm she had not known in years. Her Phoenix apartment, once filled with tension and intrusion, became a sanctuary. The walls no longer echoed with accusations or guilt. Instead, they held quiet mornings, soft music, and the hum of her laptop as she built campaigns that carried her agency higher than she had ever dreamed. Every sunrise she woke without the dread of another phone call asking for money. She made coffee, sometimes strong and black, sometimes sweet with cream, and sat by her window sketching ideas in her notebook. Each line and phrase was hers alone, no longer tainted by the weight of other people's expectations. By evening, she met with partners and clients who valued her for her work, not for what she could hand over. Her life was finally hers, shaped by her own effort. The campaign Derek had tried to sabotage became her triumph. With careful planning and relentless hours, she landed a major client who had once seemed out of reach. That victory snowballed into others, until her agency's name began circulating in rooms she had once only dreamed of entering. For the first time, she felt her reputation was not fragile, not dependent on anyone's approval but her own. News of her family drifted back to her through whispers and chance conversations. A former neighbor mentioned Derek had lost his job again. His debts, hidden for so long behind the cushion of her support, had caught up with him. He had missed too many shifts chasing failed investments, and his employer had finally cut ties. Claire felt a pang, but it wasn't guilt. It was the heavy confirmation that she had been right to walk away. Her parents, too, faced a reckoning. Without her financial support, they had lost their house, forced into a smaller rental that reflected a reality they had long denied. Their world, once padded by her sacrifices, had shrunk until they were left with only what they could provide for themselves. Claire did not rejoice, but neither did she ache. She had stopped measuring her own worth by their comfort. One evening, her phone buzzed with a message from Helen. The words were short, careful, as though they had been written and rewritten before being sent. I'm sorry, Claire. I didn't see how much they took from you. Claire stared at the screen, her thumb hovering above the reply button. The diner replayed in her mind, her grandmother's voice pleading for forgiveness, not knowing the full story. The sincerity in the message was real, but Claire's silence was also real. She set the phone down and chose not to reply. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Instead, she turned to Monica, who had been her anchor through it all. They met for coffee weekly, sitting in quiet cafes where laughter was light and unburdened. Monica had seen her through the online storms, the sabotage, the betrayal, and reminded her constantly that real support did not come with conditions. One morning, over steaming cups, Monica smiled at her. "You're stronger for it," she said, her eyes bright. Claire nodded, finally believing it. Her strength was not in how much she could give to others, but in how firmly she could protect her own boundaries. The success of her agency was not luck. It was built on years of grit, now free from the chains of obligation. Looking back, she saw the true cost of her family's greed. They had taken $50,000, years of trust, and countless nights of her energy. They had mocked her, lied about her, tried to ruin her reputation, and yet she stood taller than she ever had. One evening, Claire paused at her office window. The Phoenix skyline glowed with neon and desert stars, a city alive with stories. Her desk was scattered with contracts and fresh plans for the future. She realized then that her story no longer belonged to the shadows of her family's betrayal. It belonged to her, to the woman who had walked away from their demands and built something unshakable. She had lost a family, but she had gained herself. And that was enough. There were nights when the quiet pressed in so heavily that Claire wondered if she had made a mistake. Not in cutting ties, but in believing she could replace the weight of family with silence. She lay awake sometimes, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of her air conditioner. The absence of calls, of constant demands, felt both liberating and lonely. Yet in those same nights she reminded herself that peace could feel unfamiliar at first. It was not emptiness, it was space she had never been allowed before. Claire filled that space with purpose. She enrolled in community workshops, not because she needed more business knowledge but because she craved connection that was genuine. She sat in rooms filled with entrepreneurs like her, people chasing dreams without leaning on someone else's pocketbook. Their stories mirrored parts of hers, and for the first time in a long while, she felt less alone. Her agency became more than work. It became a testament to survival. She hired 2 young assistants, both eager and full of ideas. She nurtured them not just as employees but as people, determined never to repeat the cycle of taking without giving. In their gratitude, she saw what respect looked like when it was earned rather than demanded. At a networking event downtown, she stood before a crowd of peers and spoke about resilience. Her voice, steady but carrying under the dim lights, told the story not of betrayal but of boundaries. She didn't mention Derek or her parents by name, but the lessons were there in every pause, every example of what happens when generosity turns into exploitation. When the room applauded, Claire felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. This applause wasn't for the illusion of her being a generous daughter. It was for her strength, her clarity, her work. Still, the ghosts of her family lingered. A photograph of her childhood, tucked away in a box, showed smiles that once felt real. She found it while cleaning one afternoon, dust gathering on the edges. For a moment, she almost convinced herself to call her mother, to bridge the silence. But then she remembered the smirk on Derek's face as he whispered, "No food for you." She remembered her mother's laughter ringing like a cruel bell, her father's indifference. She slid the photo back into the box and closed the lid. Some doors had to stay shut. The world outside her family embraced her slowly but surely. Her clients trusted her. Her employees relied on her. Her friends cherished her. Monica remained constant, a mirror reminding her of her progress. "You're not defined by them," Monica said one evening over wine, her voice firm. "You define yourself. And look at what you've built." Claire smiled softly, feeling the truth settle into her bones. It wasn't always easy. The sting of betrayal didn't vanish overnight. There were moments when old wounds reopened, when she overheard someone mention her parents, and felt the ache of what could have been. But she had learned that strength was not the absence of pain. It was the choice to keep moving through it. By the end of that year, Claire stood in her office, surrounded by plans for expansion. The walls bore framed achievements, each one a milestone carved from perseverance. She looked out at the Phoenix skyline. Lights scattered like stars across the desert. For years she had carried her family like a burden strapped to her back, believing love was measured in sacrifice. Now she knew love was also measured in self-respect. She whispered to herself, almost as if speaking to the woman she used to be, "You did not lose. You reclaimed." Spring arrived with a softness that Phoenix rarely offered. The mornings were cooler. The evenings carried a breeze. And Claire found herself walking more often, letting her thoughts unravel under the open desert sky. Each step reminded her she was moving forward, even when memories tugged at her like stubborn shadows. Her agency had grown beyond her original dreams. What had started as a single desk in her apartment now occupied a bright office downtown, with glass windows overlooking the bustle of the city. She had a small but loyal team who respected her leadership. They asked questions, shared ideas, and celebrated wins together. The culture was nothing like the one she had grown up in. It was built on honesty, gratitude, and mutual respect. One Friday afternoon, her team surprised her with a cake to celebrate closing a major account. As they sang and laughed, Claire stood back for a moment, watching. She realized these were the kinds of celebrations she had always craved. Simple, sincere, free from hidden strings. No one here expected her to foot the bill for their lives. They simply wanted to share in the joy of what they had achieved together. Still, her family's shadow crept back at unexpected times. Once, while scrolling through her phone, she saw a comment under one of her agency's posts. It came from a distant cousin. "Heard you abandoned your parents. Family should come first." The words stung, not because they were true, but because they echoed the lies Derek had spread. Claire deleted the comment, but not before it reminded her that her family's betrayal had left marks beyond her immediate circle. She sat with Monica the next morning at their favorite cafe. The clinking of cups and hum of conversation filled the space as she vented her frustration. "They've poisoned the well," Claire said. "Even people who barely know me think I'm the villain." Monica leaned across the table, her eyes fierce. "You're not responsible for their narrative. You're responsible for your truth. And anyone worth having in your life will see it." Claire nodded slowly, letting the words settle. Monica's support had become a lifeline, a reminder that loyalty still existed in the world. Letters and emails from her parents went unanswered. Some were angry, others pleading, but all carried the same thread: a refusal to acknowledge what they had done. Derek, too, tried to reach her once more, a long message filled with excuses and half-hearted promises to pay her back. She didn't respond. She had learned that closure was not something they could give her. It was something she had to choose for herself. And she did. Piece by piece, day by day. She chose closure in the mornings she spent sketching campaign ideas without guilt. She chose closure in the laughter she shared with her team. She chose closure in the evenings she spent walking beneath the Phoenix sky, the city alive with possibility. One evening, she stopped on a bridge that overlooked the downtown lights. Cars streamed below, their headlights weaving through the night. She leaned on the railing, breathing in the warm desert air, and spoke softly to herself. I didn't lose my family, I lost their hold on me. It was a small sentence, but it carried the weight of years. She felt lighter as she said it, as though the words themselves loosened the last of the chains that had bound her. Her story was no longer about what her family had taken. It was about what she had built in spite of it. And standing there above the city she loved, Claire finally knew. She hadn't just survived. She had won. Summer in Phoenix was relentless. The kind of heat that pressed against glass and curled off sidewalks in visible waves. Claire felt it each morning as she left her apartment, yet instead of draining her, it fueled her. The desert's intensity mirrored her own, a reminder that strength was forged in harsh conditions. She had been burned, yes, but she had also emerged tempered, unbreakable. Her agency's reputation soared, earning features in local business journals and whispers in national circles. Clients spoke of her with admiration, describing her not only as talented but as trustworthy, a word that cut deep given the betrayal she had endured. She poured herself into her work, not as an escape but as a declaration. She was not the sum of her family's lies. She was the architect of her own legacy. One evening, as she prepared notes for a presentation, her phone buzzed with a message from Helen. The last time her grandmother had reached out, Claire had chosen silence. Now, months later, she read the words carefully. I hope you are well. I want you to know I love you, even if I don't understand everything. It was softer than before, stripped of demands, and though it tugged at Claire's heart, she placed the phone face down. Some wounds required more time than apologies could cover. Her parents' names still surfaced in gossip, stories told by people who once leaned close to her family for favors. She learned through whispers that they had downsized again, struggling to adjust to a life without her support. Derek's debts deepened, his failed investments piling into a mountain he could no longer climb. Once that knowledge would have crushed her with guilt. Now, it only affirmed the necessity of her choice. She had not abandoned them, they had abandoned her long before. Claire began sharing her story in subtle ways, not to expose but to inspire. At conferences, she spoke about resilience, about setting boundaries, about how success without peace was just another cage. She never used their names, never aired the ugliest details. But her words carried the weight of lived truth. Audiences leaned forward, listening, and afterward people approached her with tears in their eyes saying, "That was my story too." Those moments reminded her that she wasn't alone, that countless others had been manipulated by those who should have loved them. Her survival became more than personal. It became a message. You can say no and still be whole. One late night, she sat at her desk, the Phoenix skyline glittering beyond her window. Papers were spread out, plans for expansion, sketches for campaigns that would take her agency into the next year. She leaned back in her chair, exhaustion settling over her. But it was the satisfying kind, the kind that came from building something of her own. She thought about the years she had lost to giving, the $50,000 she would never see again, the countless hours spent worrying about bills that weren't hers. The humiliation of being labeled a limited guest at her own celebration. All of it had carved scars into her life. But scars, she realized, were proof of healing, not just damage. They marked survival, and survival was strength. Claire whispered into the quiet room, as though telling her younger self, "You didn't fail. You chose yourself." Her reflection in the window looked back at her, steadier than before, and she knew the truth of it. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Inside, Claire smiled faintly, closing her laptop. She had lost her family, but she had gained her freedom. And in the stillness of her office, surrounded by the evidence of her hard work, she knew with certainty that freedom was worth everything.